What do you do when your family excludes you from a trip they promised, only to rub it in with photos? Stella had spent months planning what should have been a family trip, the kind she believed would bring her closer to the people she loved. But instead, her parents decided to postpone it, and she was left behind. Days later, the truth came crashing down as she scrolled through Facebook. Her family went without her. Stay tuned to see how Stella confronts her family's betrayal and stands up for herself. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories. I grew up in a small town, in a modest 2-story house with my parents and my older sister Gemma. She was only 2 years older, but it often felt like we lived in entirely different worlds. My father owned a small cafe that brought in just enough to keep us comfortable, while my mom stayed home and helped out occasionally. It wasn't a life of luxury, but it worked. For most of us, it was enough. Gemma, sweetheart, that presentation was absolutely brilliant. I still remember Mom saying one evening after a school event, "You're going to go so far in life, you're just so talented." I stood in the doorway clutching my own certificate from the science fair, but no one seemed to notice. It was always like that: Gemma, the star, and me, the shadow. That was the pattern of my childhood. Gemma got the latest iPhone while I inherited her old one with the cracked screen. She wore designer clothes while I wore her hand-me-downs. Every family gathering was a showcase for Gemma's achievements. "Did you hear about Gemma's SAT scores?" Dad would proudly announce to the relatives. "Top percentile, and she's president of the debate club too." I learned to fade into the background during these conversations, knowing my straight B's and position as treasurer of the environmental club wouldn't even be mentioned. It wasn't that I was failing, I was doing fine. But in our house, fine might as well have been failure. "Stella," Mom said one day while I helped her fold laundry, "you should really think about practical career options. Maybe something in retail or service. There's nothing wrong with honest work." The words stung, but I had grown used to them, the constant reminders of my supposed limitations. What I hadn't gotten used to, though, was the way they seemed to actively work to reinforce them. Looking back now, I see how those early years laid the foundation for everything that followed: the constant comparisons, the subtle put-downs, the clear message that I was somehow less than my sister. All of it left marks that would take years to heal. But sometimes, the deepest wounds become the strongest motivations, and my family had no idea how their treatment would eventually shape all our futures. I'll never forget the day Gemma got her college acceptance letter. The whole house erupted in celebration. Mom made her favorite dinner, Dad brought home an expensive bottle of wine, and they spent the entire evening making plans for her future. "Our brilliant girl is going to one of the best colleges in the city." Mom couldn't stop grinning. "We've been saving for this moment since you were born, sweetheart." I sat quietly at the dinner table, pushing food around my plate, trying to imagine what my own celebration might be like in 2 years. I should have known better. When my turn came, the response couldn't have been more different. I had worked hard to maintain good grades, joined clubs, even taken extra courses to boost my college applications, but none of that seemed to matter. "College?" Mom's laugh was sharp and dismissive when I brought up the subject. "Stella, be realistic. We just can't afford to send you to college. Besides, you're not really college material." "But what about all the money you saved for Gemma?" I asked, my voice shaking. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. "That was different. Gemma had a clear path, exceptional grades. Well, you're more suited for practical work. Speaking of which, I could use another waitress at the cafe." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I could work while studying," I pleaded. "Please, just help me get started. We could borrow from relatives or take out a loan. I'll pay back every penny with interest. I'll even get it in writing with a lawyer." "We never borrow from anyone in principle," Mom said coldly. "We don't borrow money, and we're not going to change our principles for you. You need to accept your limitations and find a suitable job." I spent that night crying in my room, but by morning, determination had replaced my tears. I went to the only people who had ever truly seen me, my grandparents. "Grandpa, Grandma, I need your help." I explained everything through tears at their kitchen table. "I can't just give up on college. I can't." Grandpa's eyes were filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. We don't have savings, sweetheart, but let me see what I can do. No grandchild of mine is going to have their dreams crushed like this. The next few weeks were a roller coaster of emotions. First, the disappointment of the bank rejecting the loan application. Then, the shocking moment when Grandpa announced he was selling their old country house and the plot of land it sat on. The sale of the property provided exactly enough for my college tuition. I applied to study investment management in a city far from home, as far as I could get from the constant reminders of my family's lack of faith in me. The day I left, Mom and Dad didn't even come to say goodbye. Only my grandparents stood at the bus station, Grandma hugging me tight while Grandpa wiped away what he tried to pretend weren't tears. From that day forward, I cut ties with my parents completely. When breaks came and I had to return to town, I stayed with my grandparents in their now smaller house. Their sacrifice meant everything to me, and every time I walked into their modest home, I was reminded of what real family support looked like. After 4 years of relentless work, I finally graduated with my degree in investment management. I returned to my hometown, diploma in hand and dreams bigger than ever, only to have reality hit like a freight train. The job market wasn't exactly welcoming to new graduates, and after weeks of sending out applications, I was met with nothing but silence. Eventually, I landed a job at a small trading company. It wasn't the prestigious investment firm I had envisioned, but it was a start. I found a modest apartment on the outskirts of town, nothing glamorous, but it was mine. Paid for with my own money. Then came the call I never saw coming. "Stella?" Gemma's voice was as sweet as honey on the other end of the line. "It's been ages. You should come over for dinner this weekend. I'd love to catch up." Something in her tone should have sounded an alarm, but I ignored it. Maybe time had changed things. Maybe we could finally have a real relationship as adults. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I walked into Gemma's house that evening, it took less than a second to realize I had walked straight into a trap. My parents were already there, sitting with Gemma's boyfriend, a slick guy in an expensive suit who barely even glanced at me. The interrogation began as soon as we sat down to eat. "So, Stella," Mom said, her fork hovering mid-air, "tell us about this job of yours." I kept my voice steady, forcing a smile. "I'm working at a trading company. It's small, but—" Gemma cut me off with a laugh. "A trading company? You mean like one of those discount stores? Honestly, you didn't need a college degree for that. Anyone could just walk in and get that job." I felt the heat of humiliation flood my cheeks, but I held my ground. "Unlike Gemma," Mom beamed, "who's a manager at Citibank, and Trevor here is a lawyer with Anderson and Pierce." Trevor, the smug boyfriend, nodded with a self-satisfied grin. "Top law firm in the state." "I told you college wasn't necessary for you, dear," Mom sighed, the words dripping with condescension. "Such a waste of your grandfather's property." Dad chuckled, swirling his wine glass like he was trying to amuse himself. "Hey, my offer still stands. I could use an educated waitress at the cafe. Think how impressed the customers would be. Would you like fries with that from someone with a college degree?" They all laughed. Everyone, except me. I stared at my plate, pushing the food around like I had done so many times as a child, trying to shrink into myself. "Where did you say you're living now?" Gemma asked, though I hadn't mentioned it yet. "I found a place on Cedar Street," I said quietly, not meeting anyone's eyes. The table erupted in exaggerated gasps. "Cedar Street?" Gemma's eyes widened, pretending to be concerned. "Oh, Stella, that's literally the worst neighborhood in the city. Only—" She paused, letting the words sink in. "Well, you know, people who can't afford better live there." "Beggars," Mom stage whispered, and they all burst into laughter again. Something inside me snapped. After all these years of distance, nothing had changed. They were still the same cruel, judgmental people they'd always been. I stood up so abruptly that my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You know what?" I spat, fury lacing my voice. "I'd rather be a beggar than be like any of you." I took a deep breath, each word hitting harder than the last. At least I got where I am on my own without riding on someone else's coattails or living off Daddy's money. I grabbed my purse, not sparing them another glance, and stormed toward the door. Their protests and accusations followed me, but I didn't stop. I was done. As I walked out into the night, I promised myself it would be the last time I ever set foot in their presence. Life has a funny way of surprising you. Just when you think you've hit a dead end, I was still working at the small trading company, doing my best, but feeling stuck when my phone rang one afternoon. It was Laura, my old college roommate. "Stella, you're not going to believe this!" She was practically shouting with excitement. "Remember how we always talked about working for Maxwell Investment Group? They're opening an office in your city and they're looking for fresh talent. I already put in a good word for you." My heart started racing. Maxwell was one of the biggest names in investment management. I spent that night updating my resume and the next week preparing for the interview. When I walked into their temporary office, I felt like everything in my life had been leading to this moment. The interview wasn't easy. They grilled me on everything from market trends to specific investment strategies. But all those extra hours I'd put in at my current job, all the additional research I'd done in my free time, it all paid off. A week later, I got the call. I was in. From day one, I threw myself into the work. While others went home at 5, I stayed late developing new investment strategies and refining my project proposals. My first major project was managing a portfolio for a mid-sized tech company. When it yielded a 40% return in the first quarter, people started noticing. "Stella, this is exceptional work," my supervisor said during my 6-month review. Along with his praise came a bonus that was larger than my entire year's salary at the previous company. But it wasn't enough. I worked harder, took on bigger projects, built a reputation for turning struggling investments into gold mines. The bonuses kept getting bigger, and I had a plan for every penny. 2 years after starting at Maxwell, I walked into a luxury car dealership. The salesman probably thought I was lost until I pointed to their top-of-the-line model and said, "I'll take that one." An hour later, I was pulling up to my grandparents' house in a gleaming new car, complete with a giant red bow on top. Grandpa's jaw dropped when I handed him the keys. But I wasn't done. The next month, I closed on a stunning apartment in the Heights, the most prestigious new development in the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, and a view that made you feel like you owned the whole city. I was walking out of my building one morning, coffee in hand, when I heard a familiar voice. "Stella?" Gemma stood there in her designer workout gear, looking like she'd seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. "Oh, I live here," I said casually, pointing to the penthouse level of the building. "Just bought it, actually." The look on Gemma's face was priceless, a mixture of disbelief, shock, and something else. For the first time in our lives, I saw envy in my perfect sister's eyes. A week after my encounter with Gemma, my phone rang. Seeing my parents' number on the screen was surprising enough. They hadn't called me in years. Even more surprising was that they were in the neighborhood and wanted to stop by. I agreed, more out of curiosity than anything else. When they walked into my apartment, their expressions were priceless. Mom's eyes darted from the panoramic windows to the designer furniture, while Dad stood awkwardly in the entrance as if afraid to touch anything. "This is quite impressive," Mom managed, running her finger along my marble kitchen counter. "You must be doing very well for yourself." "I am," I replied simply, offering them seats on my Italian leather sofa. They exchanged glances before Mom cleared her throat. "Well, we actually have some news. Gemma is engaged to Trevor," they announced. "It was announced last month at the engagement party." An engagement party I hadn't been invited to, of course. "They're planning the wedding for 6 months from now," Mom continued, her voice getting that familiar wheedling tone I remembered from childhood. "We've offered to pay half the expenses, as is traditional." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "But it seems the total budget is, well, it's $300,000. I nearly choked on my water. $300,000? "Trevor's family has certain expectations," Mom explained quickly. "They're very prominent in the community. We announced we'd cover half before we knew the amount, and now—" She trailed off, looking at me meaningfully. "Now you need $150,000, I finished for her. "Exactly," Mom brightened. And since you're doing so well, living in this beautiful apartment, working at such a prestigious firm, you want me to give you the money? I said flatly. Loan, Dad interjected. We're asking for a loan. We'll pay you back, of course. We'll even get it notarized. We know it's a lot, Mom said quickly, but we can't back out now. It would be so embarrassing with Trevor's family. They're expecting a certain standard. Like when I wanted to go to college, I interrupted. Like when I begged you for help? When I offered to sign a legal document promising to pay you back? Mom's face flushed. That was different. Different how? Because it was me asking? Because you told me you don't borrow money on principle? Stella, be reasonable. Dad started. Reasonable? I stood up. Like you were reasonable when you told me I wasn't college material? When you offered me a waitress job instead of helping me get an education? When you let Grandpa sell his property to help me while you saved all your money for Gemma? That's not fair, Mom protested. No, what's not fair is that you're only here because you need something from me. You didn't invite me to the engagement party. You haven't spoken to me in years, and now you want $150,000? I walked to the door and opened it. I don't loan money on principle. I believe that's a family tradition, isn't it? Mom's face turned red with anger. How dare you throw our words back at us after everything we've done for you? Everything you've done for me? I laughed bitterly. Please leave now. They stormed out, Mom muttering about ingratitude and Dad avoiding eye contact. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a heavy weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to them on my terms, in my own home, from a position of strength. The phone rang the next day. It was Gemma. What is wrong with you? She didn't even bother with a hello. Mom told me what happened. How can you be so selfish? I sat back in my office chair, watching the sunset through the panoramic windows, the vibrant colors reflecting the quiet anger that had been growing inside me. Selfish? That's rich coming from you, Gemma. We're family, right? Family helps each other. You've got the money. Everyone knows you're doing well now, so why won't you help with my wedding? I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. Family? Now I'm suddenly family? What about when I visited your house and you all called me a beggar? What about when you mocked where I lived? When you laughed at my job? Was I family then? Gemma's voice was defensive. That was different. We were just teasing. You're being ridiculous now. No, I interrupted, my voice steady. What's ridiculous is that none of you spoke to me for years until you needed something. If you're so desperate for money, why don't you ask our parents? They're your real family, after all. They've made that pretty clear over the years. Her voice turned venomous. You bitter, ungrateful! Gemma exploded. You think you're so much better than us now with your fancy apartment and big job. You're still the same pathetic little sister who was never good enough. The line went dead as she hung up. I sat there, feeling a strange calm wash over me. Her words didn't hurt anymore. They just made me tired. A week later, I was sitting at Sunday dinner at my grandparents' house, a tradition I'd kept up ever since college. Grandma was unusually quiet as she served the pot roast. Grandpa broke the silence first, his voice heavy. Your parents called us yesterday. I put down my fork. Let me guess. They asked for money for the wedding. Grandma nodded. They're getting desperate. I think your mother had quite a bit to say about family obligations. When we told them we're retired and don't have that kind of money, your mother had the nerve to suggest we sell something. She said, well, you sold the land for Stella's college, didn't you? Then she suggested we sell the car. I blinked in shock. The car I gave you? She actually suggested you sell my gift? Grandpa's voice had a note of satisfaction. That's when I hung up on her. Told her that, unlike some people, we don't sell gifts from family members who actually care about us. Grandma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. The three of us sat there in understanding silence, bound together by something deeper than blood ties. Word travels fast in a small town, and my parents made sure it traveled even faster. Within weeks, their version of events had spread through our entire extended family and social circle. I started hearing snippets of their carefully crafted narrative from various sources. Did you hear about the younger daughter? My mother's friend loudly gossiped at the local grocery store, not realizing I was in the next aisle. Got some fancy job, and now she thinks she's too good for her own family. Won't even speak to them anymore. Says they're too poor for her now. At church, relatives would shoot disapproving glances my way when I visited with my grandparents. My Aunt Martha called one evening, heavy with judgment. Your mother told me you wouldn't even let her into your apartment when she came to visit. How could you treat your own mother that way? I could have corrected the record, could have told everyone how my parents had only reached out when they needed money, how they'd never supported my dreams, how they'd mocked and belittled me at every turn. But I'd learned long ago that trying to defend yourself against toxic people only gives them more ammunition. Instead, I focused on my work, spent time with my grandparents, and let the gossip swirl around me like autumn leaves in the wind. My grandparents knew the truth. They'd lived through every moment of it with me, and that was enough. With just 2 weeks left before the wedding, Gemma made one final attempt. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, dressed in her most expensive outfit and flashing her most convincing smile. "Stella, we need to talk," she said, brushing past me into the living room. "This has gone on long enough. We're sisters. We shouldn't be fighting like this." I stood by the window, arms crossed, watching her make herself comfortable on my sofa as if she owned it. "Why are you really here, Gemma?" "To make peace," she said with her best pageant winner smile. "And to help you understand the situation better. You see, Trevor's parents aren't just rich, they're old money. They have connections everywhere. The wedding has to be perfect." I waited, sensing there was more. "The final payments are due next week. The restaurant deposit, the wedding planner's fee, the flowers." She twisted her engagement ring nervously. "If Mom and Dad can't contribute their share, it's going to be so embarrassing. Trevor's parents will find out they couldn't afford it. It won't just reflect badly on them, it'll reflect on me, on my future with Trevor. So this visit isn't really about reconciling, it's about the money." "No," she insisted, her voice shaking. "Well, yes, but—" She stood up and walked over to me, placing her hand on my arm. "Stella, please, you're my sister. I need your help. We need to make a great impression on Trevor's parents." I gently removed her hand, walked to the door, and opened it. "I don't care about impressing Trevor's parents. I don't care about your perfect wedding, and I definitely don't care what any of you think anymore." "You're making a huge mistake," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You'll regret this." I smiled, feeling a rare calm settle over me. "No, Gemma. For the first time in my life, I'm absolutely certain I won't." A few days after Gemma's visit, my phone lit up with a text from Stacy, Gemma's college friend who had always been kind to me. She thought I should know what had happened at the country club the previous evening. "Your parents finally had to come clean to Trevor's family," she wrote. "They couldn't dodge the wedding planner calls anymore. It was apparently quite a scene." I could see it all so clearly. The elegant country club dining room, Trevor's wealthy parents in their designer clothes, the moment my parents had to admit they couldn't afford their share of the wedding expenses. According to Stacy, Trevor's mother had practically turned purple with rage. The fairy tale wedding began to unravel. The honeymoon suite in the Maldives was canceled. The vintage champagne order was scaled back. The designer flower arrangements were simplified. In the end, Trevor's parents agreed to cover all the expenses themselves, but the damage had already been done. The wedding went forward, but it was a far cry from the grandeur they had once envisioned. Of course, I wasn't invited. But I didn't expect to be. My grandparents received an invitation, but they declined to attend, sending a polite note about prior commitments. We spent that Saturday together instead, having a picnic in their backyard, steadfastly avoiding any mention of the event happening across town. A week later, the wedding photos appeared on social media. One evening, I found myself scrolling through them, glass of wine in hand, studying the faces in each carefully staged shot. There was Gemma in her designer gown. Trevor looked stiff and formal, his parents arranged around him like expensive statues. And my parents, easy to spot in their new outfits, probably bought on credit, trying so hard to fit in with this world of old money and country club memberships. Their smiles were strained, their poses awkward. Trevor's parents appeared in only a few photos, their expressions ranging from barely concealed disdain to outright displeasure. In one particularly telling shot, his mother was caught looking at my parents with the kind of expression usually reserved for something unpleasant found on the bottom of one's shoe. Stacy kept me updated over the following weeks. Gemma and Trevor moved into a house his parents had bought them as a wedding gift. My parents rarely visited. Apparently, they weren't quite what Trevor's family had envisioned for Sunday dinners. I haven't spoken to my parents or Gemma since before the wedding. I doubt I ever will again. But sitting here in my apartment, watching the sunset paint the city sky in shades of gold, I finally feel at peace with that fact. Some bridges once burned should stay in the ashes. What do you do when the people you once called family only reach out when they need something? When they've never supported you, but expect you to always support them? Stella spent her whole life being compared to her perfect sister Gemma, who always seemed to get everything she wanted: designer clothes, college acceptance, and the spotlight. Stella, on the other hand, was pushed aside, told that she wasn't college material and that her dreams weren't worth pursuing. But with the unwavering support of her grandparents, Stella fought for her education and her future, making something of herself despite the odds. Years later, when Stella had achieved success working at a prestigious firm, living in a beautiful apartment, her parents reappeared, not to reconcile or show love, but to ask for $150,000 to fund Gemma's wedding. They expected Stella to help, as they always had, without considering what she had already given them. But this time, Stella was done. She walked away from the toxic dynamic, cutting ties with the people who had only ever used her. She didn't need their approval anymore. She had built her success on her own terms. So, what would you do in Stella's shoes? Would you keep giving to a family who never appreciated you, or would you stand your ground and choose yourself? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
I never thought I would hear those words from my own mother. "Get out! You're no daughter of mine." Marlene's voice, usually so composed, now cracked with fury. Her face, a mask of rage, was inches from mine as she wielded a kitchen knife, its tip menacingly pointing at me. Standing there in the kitchen of the house I grew up in, I felt a mix of shock and disbelief. I had come to help, to support our family, but now I was being branded a leech, a burden. "Marlene, please put the knife down," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "You know I've been paying more than half of my salary to help with the expenses. That's $3,000 every month." But my words seemed to bounce off her, unheard. She continued her tirade, accusing me of freeloading and being ungrateful. I retreated a step, maintaining a cautious distance. The woman before me was not the mother I remembered from my childhood. She had transformed into someone unrecognizable, someone driven by anger and resentment. As she continued to rant, I couldn't help but think of my father, David. He was the reason I pursued a career in software development. My mind drifted to the times we spent together when I was a child. His face would light up whenever he talked about computers. "Look at this one, Elaine. It's amazing how technology evolves," he would say, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Those moments in the electronics stores, with him explaining the intricacies of the latest models, sparked my passion for technology. My career was a tribute to those memories, to the bond we shared. I had worked hard, earning a respectable position at a reputable tech company. My job allowed me to work remotely, which was why I moved back home when David's health took a turn for the worse. But now, faced with Marlene's unwarranted hostility, I wondered if I had made a mistake. The sound of Marlene slamming her hand on the countertop jolted me back to the present. "If I knew you'd become such a parasite, I would never have had you," she spat out. Her words stung, but I refused to let them break me. "I'm here for Dad, Marlene, not to argue with you," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. The situation was escalating beyond what I could have imagined. It was then that I heard the faint sound of a car pulling up in the driveway. David was home from his latest doctor's appointment. I rushed to open the front door, welcoming him and steering him away from the kitchen and Marlene's wrath. As I helped him settle down in the living room, I couldn't shake off the heaviness in my heart. The confrontation with Marlene had opened a chasm in our family, one that I wasn't sure could ever be bridged. I looked at my father. his face weary but smiling at me. In that moment, I knew I had to stay strong for him, regardless of the storm that was brewing in our once peaceful home. The hospital's sterile white walls felt cold and unwelcoming as I paced back and forth, waiting for news about David's condition. The call from Marlene had been abrupt and alarming. David's collapsed. We're at the hospital. When the doctor finally emerged, his face was somber. Your father had a stroke. We've managed to stabilize him, but he's not out of the woods yet. I felt a chill run down my spine. Can I see him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. In a moment, the doctor replied, but be prepared. He may have lasting effects from the stroke. As I entered the dimly lit room, I saw David lying there, frail and hooked to machines. His once strong and capable hands lay motionless by his side. I took his hand, tears welling up in my eyes. I'm here, Dad. You're going to be okay. His eyes fluttered open, and he managed a weak smile. Elaine, my girl, he murmured. I spent hours by his bedside, talking to him, reminiscing about our days exploring technology together. Every so often, Marlene would come in, her visits brief and her words few. How is he? She would ask, her tone devoid of warmth. He's fighting, Marlene. He needs us now more than ever, I would reply, hoping for some sign of compassion from her. But compassion was a language Marlene seemed to have forgotten. Instead, she was more concerned about the practicalities. What about his job? The bills? What are we going to do for money? She fretted. Her words stung. Was money all she could think about at a time like this? I bit back my frustration, focusing instead on David's needs. As days turned into weeks, it became clear that David's recovery would be a long road. The stroke had left him with limited mobility, and he struggled with simple tasks. The once vibrant man who taught me about the wonders of technology was now dependent on others for his most basic needs. During his hospitalization, I noticed Marlene's visits becoming even more infrequent and perfunctory. She seemed detached, more concerned with her own life than with David's well-being. I decided to confront her one evening. Marlene, Dad needs us. He needs your support, I said, my voice tinged with desperation. Marlene scoffed. I have my own life, Elaine. I can't be expected to drop everything. Besides, he's your father. It's your duty to take care of him. Her words cut deep, but I refused to let them deter me. He's your husband, Marlene. He needs both of us. But my pleas fell on deaf ears. Marlene was wrapped up in her own world, a world where her needs came first and everyone else's were secondary. As I left the hospital that evening, my resolve hardened. I would be there for David no matter what. Marlene's indifference only fueled my determination to ensure my father received the love and care he deserved. The days following David's return home were a whirlwind of adjustments and challenges. I had rearranged my life to accommodate my father's needs, balancing my demanding job with caregiving and household chores. One evening, as I prepared dinner after a long day of work, Marlene strolled into the kitchen. Make sure dinner is ready by 7, Elaine. And I want something nutritious, none of that bland stuff you've been making. Her words were like a slap in the face. Here I was, doing my best to manage everything, and all she could do was criticize. I'm doing the best I can, Marlene. I'm not just taking care of Dad, but the entire house, I snapped back, my patience wearing thin. Marlene let out a derisive laugh. You call this taking care? You're barely managing. I had to handle much more at your age, without complaining. I bit my tongue to keep from lashing out. Arguing with Marlene was futile. She had always been self-absorbed, but now her lack of empathy and appreciation was more glaring than ever. Later that night, I helped David with his exercises, a routine that had become our little ritual. You're doing great, Dad, I encouraged him as he struggled to move his arm. He smiled weakly. I'm sorry, Elaine. I never wanted to be a burden to you. You're not a burden, Dad. You're my father, and I love taking care of you, I reassured him, though the weight of my responsibilities was beginning to take its toll. The following morning, I found Marlene lounging in the living room, a magazine in hand. Elaine, when you finish with your work, could you clean up around here? It's getting rather dusty, she said, not even bothering to look up. I clenched my fists, frustration boiling inside me. Here I was, juggling work and caregiving, and Marlene couldn't even lift a finger to help. It was always about her comfort, her needs. That evening, as I lay in bed, exhausted and overwhelmed, I made a decision. I couldn't continue like this. Something had to change. The realization that I was alone in this battle weighed heavily on me, but I knew I had to be strong, for David's sake. Marlene's selfishness had reached a point where it was not just infuriating, but deeply hurtful. Her indifference to our struggles was a clear sign that she was no longer the mother I once knew. The bond that should have united us in caring for David had been shattered by her callousness. As the days passed, the tension in the house grew thicker. Marlene's demands became more frequent and unreasonable, while her contributions remained non-existent. The strain was becoming unbearable, and I knew I had to find a way out of this toxic environment, for both my father's and my own sanity. The discovery was accidental, yet it shattered any remaining illusions I had about Marlene. I was searching for an old photo album in my closet when I noticed the empty space where my collection of designer bags and accessories used to be. Confusion turned to horror as I realized they were all gone. Confronting Marlene was inevitable. "Did you go into my room and take my things?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. Marlene, lounging on the sofa with a glass of wine, didn't even bother to look up. "Your room? This is my house, Elaine. I don't need your permission to enter any room." Her nonchalant dismissal of my privacy was infuriating, but what she said next was even worse. "You had some pretty good stuff there. Sold them off for a nice sum. You should be thanking me for making good use of them." I was speechless. The audacity of her actions was beyond belief. "You sold my belongings? Those were mine, Marlene. You had no right." Marlene scoffed, finally turning to face me. "Right? I'm your mother. I have every right. Besides, it's only fair since you're living here rent-free." Her twisted logic made my blood boil. Living here to take care of Dad is not living rent-free, and what you did is theft, Marlene, plain and simple. But Marlene was unmoved. "Theft? Don't be dramatic, Elaine. I'm just taking what's owed to me. After all, I've been putting up with you and your father. That was the last straw." The woman in front of me was not the mother I grew up with. She was a stranger, consumed by selfishness and greed. Over the next few days, I struggled to come to terms with Marlene's betrayal. My sense of violation was profound. But more than that, it was the realization that she saw us not as family, but as assets to exploit. I began to plan our escape. David, despite his weakened state, was supportive. "We can't stay here, Elaine, not with her," he said one evening, his voice filled with sadness and resolve. The plan was simple, yet daunting. We would leave while Marlene was out, taking only what we needed. I found a small but comfortable apartment close to the hospital and arranged everything in secret. The day of our departure was tense. As the movers quietly packed our belongings, I watched the clock, praying that Marlene wouldn't return early. David sat in his wheelchair, a mix of apprehension and relief on his face. As we drove away from the house, I couldn't help but feel a pang of loss. This was the home where I had grown up, where I had so many memories with my father. But it was also the place where I had lost my mother. Not to death, but to something far worse: greed and indifference. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller and smaller, and with it, Marlene's hold on our lives. We were finally free, but the cost of that freedom was more than I had ever imagined. Our new apartment was modest, but filled with a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. As I unpacked our belongings, David watched, a look of contentment on his face. "It's good to be away from that house, Elaine. I haven't felt this relaxed in years." I smiled at him, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "Me too, Dad. We'll make new memories here, just the two of us." But our tranquility was short-lived. A few days after our move, I received a call from Marlene. Her voice was icy, laced with anger and disbelief. "Where are you? Why have you taken David? You can't just leave like that." I held the phone away from my ear, her shrill voice echoing in the quiet room. "You told me to leave, Marlene. So I did. Dad and I are safe and happy now." There was a pause on the other end. "You think you can just walk away, after everything I've done for you?" I clenched my jaw, fighting back the urge to yell. "Everything you've done? You mean selling my belongings? Neglecting Dad?" Her response was a venomous laugh. "Oh, please, you're just like your father, weak and pathetic. You'll come crawling back, you need me." But I was done being her victim. "No, Marlene, we don't need you, we never did." Hanging up, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Marlene had chosen her path, and now we were choosing ours. The following weeks were a time of healing and adjustment. David's health was slowly improving, and we settled into a comfortable routine. I found joy in the small things, cooking meals for us, watching movies together, and talking about everything and nothing. But our peace was once again shattered when I discovered Marlene had been spreading lies about us to our relatives and friends. She painted herself as the victim, abandoned by her ungrateful daughter and sick husband. I was furious. How dare she twist the truth to gain sympathy? It was time for Marlene to face the consequences of her actions. I contacted a lawyer, detailing the years of emotional and financial abuse we had endured. "We want to take legal action," I told him. "Marlene needs to be held accountable." The lawyer was sympathetic, but warned me that it would be a challenging case. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? It will be hard, especially on your father." I looked at David, who nodded resolutely. "We're sure. It's not just about us, it's about setting things right." As the legal battle began, I felt a sense of purpose. This was more than just revenge. It was about standing up to a bully, about reclaiming our dignity. Marlene fought back fiercely, her true nature revealing itself in court. Her lies and manipulations were laid bare for all to see. The process was grueling, but with each passing day I felt stronger, more empowered. Finally, the verdict was in our favor. Marlene was ordered to pay restitution for the items she had sold and for the emotional distress she had caused. Leaving the courthouse, David squeezed my hand. "You did it, Elaine. You stood up to her." I smiled, tears of relief and triumph in my eyes. "We did it, Dad. Together." The legal victory over Marlene was more than just a win in court. It was a reclaiming of our lives and dignity. Yet, as we settled into our new normal, I couldn't shake off a lingering sense of unease. One afternoon, a few weeks after the trial, my phone buzzed with a message that made my heart sink. It was from a cousin, informing me that Marlene had been spreading vicious rumors about me in the family, painting me as an ungrateful daughter who had manipulated her poor, sick father to steal his money and abandon her. Fury and disbelief churned inside me. How could she continue her deceitful ways even after everything that had happened? I realized then that Marlene would never change. She was a toxin that needed to be completely removed from our lives. I decided to confront her. Arriving at what used to be our family home, I was greeted by the sight of Marlene, who looked surprised and slightly apprehensive. "Elaine, what are you doing here?" she asked, a false note of concern in her voice. "I'm here to put an end to your lies, Marlene. You've lost in court, and yet you continue to spread falsehoods about me and Dad. Why can't you just leave us in peace?" Marlene's expression hardened. "Peace? You've taken everything from Elaine, my husband, my home, my reputation. You think I'll just sit back and accept that?" "I haven't taken anything that wasn't already destroyed by your own actions," I shot back. "You've pushed everyone away with your selfishness and greed." Marlene stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "You think you've won, don't you? But I'll make sure everyone knows the truth about you. I'll ruin you, just like you've ruined me." I stood my ground, my resolve unwavering. "No, Marlene, you're the one who's ruined, and I won't let you drag us down any longer." Turning on my heel, I left her standing on the doorstep, her angry shouts fading behind me. I knew that our battle was far from over, but I was ready to fight for our newfound freedom and peace. In the following days, I worked with our lawyer to file a restraining order against Marlene. It was a drastic step, but necessary to protect ourselves from her relentless harassment and defamation. The day the restraining order was granted felt like a second victory. Marlene was legally bound to stay away from us, to cease her poisonous campaign against us. It was a relief, but also a sad confirmation that the woman who had once been my mother was now nothing more than a bitter stranger. David and I could finally breathe a little easier, knowing that Marlene's ability to harm us was significantly curtailed. We focused on rebuilding our lives, on healing from the years of emotional turmoil. As I watched David one evening, laughing at a comedy show on TV, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had weathered the storm together, and though the scars remained, we were stronger for it. Marlene's reign of terror was over, and we were free to live our lives without her shadow looming over us. Months had passed since the restraining order against Marlene was put in place, and life had gradually settled into a new rhythm. The apartment felt like a true home, filled with laughter and memories in the making. David's health was stable, and though the past still cast a shadow, we were moving forward. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, the phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but something compelled me to answer. "Hello?" "Catherine, it's me," came Marlene's voice, unmistakable and unwelcome. My heart sank. "Marlene, you know you shouldn't be calling. There's a restraining order." I know, but listen to me," she pleaded. "I need your help. I'm in trouble." Her words were laced with desperation, a stark contrast to her usual haughty tone. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, despite myself. "I'm broke, Elaine. I've lost everything. I need money. You owe me that much." I felt a mix of anger and pity. Marlene, once so proud and manipulative, was now reduced to begging. "I don't owe you anything, Marlene. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." There was a pause, and then her voice came through again, softer this time. "Please, Elaine, I'm your mother. Don't you have any compassion?" The word compassion coming from her was almost laughable. "Compassion? After everything you've done? You've never shown any compassion to Dad or me. You only care about yourself." "Elaine, please," she started, but I cut her off. "No, Marlene. It's over. You need to take responsibility for your actions. Goodbye." I hung up, my hand trembling slightly. The finality of that call was both liberating and heartbreaking. Marlene had chosen her path, and it had led her to this. I turned back to the stove, the sizzle of the cooking food grounding me. David wheeled himself into the kitchen, a concerned look on his face. "Was that Marlene?" I nodded. "Yes, but it's handled. She won't bother us again." David reached out, placing a hand on mine. "You're a strong woman, Elaine. I'm proud of you." I squeezed his hand, smiling. I had a good teacher. In the days that followed, I reflected on our journey. We had faced betrayal and heartache, but we had also found strength and resilience. Marlene's absence in our lives was a void, but it was a void filled with peace. As I watched the sunset from our balcony, with David beside me, I felt a sense of closure. Our story had been one of struggle, but also of triumph. We had overcome the darkness, and now the future was ours to shape. "Here's to new beginnings." "Dad," I said, raising a glass of lemonade. "To new beginnings," he echoed, clinking his glass against mine. And in that moment I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together as a family. I remember the exact moment my world shattered. It was a Tuesday afternoon, ordinary in every sense, until Ethan, my 10-year-old son, dropped the bombshell. "Mom, I locked the basement door," he said, his voice innocent, unaware of the chaos he had just unleashed. My heart skipped a beat. The basement, Nathan's sanctuary, the place he retreated to every evening, claiming he needed time for his woodworking projects. But today, he wasn't alone. Today, my sister Rachel, the golden child in our family, the one who could do no wrong, was with him. They thought they were clever, sneaking around while I was supposed to be out with Ethan. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. My name is Claire Montgomery. At 32, I thought I had my life figured out. A stable marriage to Nathan, my college sweetheart, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and our son, Ethan. I had always wanted a bigger family, but life and my relationship with Rachel had made me reconsider. Growing up, it was always Rachel this, Rachel that. Our parents doted on her, ignoring my achievements, my struggles. I never wanted Ethan to feel that kind of neglect, that sting of favoritism. As I stood there processing Ethan's words, a storm brewed inside me. Rage, betrayal, disbelief, they swirled in my head, each emotion more overpowering than the last. Nathan and Rachel? It was like a sick joke, a plot twist in a trashy novel. I needed to see it for myself. I needed to confront them. But as I moved towards the basement door, I stopped. No, they didn't deserve the satisfaction of seeing me break. They didn't deserve my tears, my anger. In that moment, a cold, hard resolve settled over me. Let them stay there, locked in their den of deceit. Let them wonder, panic even, when I didn't come to their rescue. Ethan's voice snapped me out of my reverie. "Mom, are you okay?" I forced a smile, my heart aching for my innocent child, caught in the middle of this sordid affair. "Yes, honey. I just remembered we have that picnic today, remember? Just the two of us." His face lit up and guilt gnawed at me. I was about to drag my child into my plan for revenge, but it was too late to turn back now. "Let's get going," I said, my voice steady. As we drove away from the house, I couldn't help but glance at the rearview mirror, half expecting Nathan or Rachel to come running out, calling for us to stop. But there was nothing. Just the quiet suburban street, basking in the afternoon sun, oblivious to the drama unfolding in my home. The picnic was a blur. Ethan chattered about school, his friends, the new video game he wanted. I nodded and smiled, but my thoughts were elsewhere, on the betrayal that had uprooted my life. As we laid out our spread on the grassy field, Ethan's laughter ringing in my ears, a part of me wondered if I was doing the right thing. But then I remembered their laughter, their whispers, the way they thought they could make a fool out of me. No, this was just the beginning. Rachel and Nathan had crossed a line, and there was no going back. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I made a silent vow. I would make them pay. They would regret the day they underestimated Claire Montgomery. The next morning dawned with an air of pretense, as if the sun itself was trying to brush off the darkness of the previous night. I had barely slept, my mind replaying the scenario over and over again. Nathan and Rachel, locked in the basement, the secret they thought they had so cleverly hidden now laid bare. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls from Nathan. I watched it ring, feeling a twisted satisfaction in ignoring his desperate attempts to reach me. Let him stew in his guilt and fear. Ethan, oblivious to the storm brewing, munched on his cereal. "Is Dad still in the basement? He sure loves that place," he remarked innocently. I forced a smile, hiding the turmoil inside. "Yes, he's very busy with his projects," I lied smoothly. As Ethan left for school, I braced myself for what was to come. The confrontation was inevitable, but first, I needed answers. I needed to know how deep this betrayal ran. I dialed Rachel. She picked up on the first ring, her voice laced with panic. "Claire, oh my God, you won't believe what happened. Nathan and I got locked in the basement. It was so scary." Her feigned innocence fueled my anger. "Really, Rachel? How terrifying for you," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. She hesitated, sensing my mood. "Claire, I can explain. It's not what you think." "Oh, I think it's exactly what I think. How long, Rachel? How long have you been sneaking around with my husband?" There was silence on the other end. Then a soft sob. "It just happened, Claire. It wasn't planned, I swear." I laughed bitterly. "Just happened? You expect me to believe that?" "I'm not a fool, Rachel," she cried, now her sobs loud and unconvincing. "Please, Claire, you have to believe me. It was a mistake." "A mistake? No, Rachel. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk at the store. This is a choice to betray your own sister. I hope he was worth it." I hung up before she could reply, her sobs still echoing in my ear. I felt a rush of power, of control. For once, I was not the overlooked sister, the one left in the shadows. I was the one calling the shots. But my triumph was short-lived. The reality of what had happened, of what I had lost, began to sink in. Nathan and I had built a life together, a family, and now it was all crumbling down, like a house of cards in a gust of wind. I looked around the house at the photos on the walls, the memories we had created. They now felt like a mockery, a cruel joke. I had been living a lie, and the truth was a bitter pill to swallow. But swallow it I must. There was no going back now. Nathan and Rachel had made their choice, and I had made mine. The path ahead was unclear, fraught with pain and uncertainty. But one thing was certain. I would not be the victim in this sordid tale. I would write my own ending, and it would be one of triumph, not defeat. As I gathered the photos, tearing them from their frames, a plan began to form in my mind. Rachel and Nathan had taken everything from me. It was time to return the favor. The day unfolded with a deceptive calm, the normalcy of my routine clashing with the turmoil within. But beneath the surface, my mind was a whirlwind of plotting and planning. Today was the day I'd set my revenge in motion. I had arranged for Ethan to spend the weekend at a friend's house. He deserved a break from the tense atmosphere at home, and I needed space to enact my plan without his innocent eyes watching. I called Tyler, Rachel's son from her first marriage, and invited him over. Tyler, a quiet 15-year-old, had always been close to Ethan, more like a brother than a cousin. There was a maturity in him, a certain depth that came from dealing with Rachel's antics all his life. "Hey, Aunt Claire," Tyler greeted me, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Is everything okay?" I sighed. "Tyler, I need to talk to you. It's about your mom and Nathan." His expression hardened slightly. "I'm not surprised," he said, a note of bitterness creeping into his voice. "Mom's always been like this." I was taken aback by his candidness. "You know?" He nodded. "I've seen her do this before, with my stepdad. She thinks nobody knows, but I've seen enough." His words confirmed my worst fears, and I felt a wave of sympathy for the boy. "I'm planning something, Tyler. A picnic this weekend. I need your help." Tyler's eyes narrowed, understanding dawning. "You want to leave them alone at the house," he surmised. "Yes," I admitted. "I want them to be exposed for everyone to see them for who they really are." "I'm in," Tyler said without hesitation. His loyalty to me over his own mother was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. The weekend arrived, and everything was set. The picnic was a ruse, a way to get everyone out of the house except Nathan and Rachel. I made sure they knew about it, dropping hints about how I'd be out the whole day, the house empty. As we left for the picnic, I saw Rachel's car pull into the driveway. My heart raced with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. This was it, the point of no return. Tyler was unusually quiet during the drive. As we set up our picnic spot, I noticed him staring into the distance, lost in thought. "You okay, Tyler?" I asked gently. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. I can't believe she's doing this again. To you, Aunt Claire." I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this." He shook his head. "I'm not sorry. I'm glad I can help expose her. Maybe then she'll realize." His voice trailed off, but I understood. Tyler, like me, was seeking closure, a way to deal with the betrayal that had upended our lives. As the day wore on, I found myself checking my phone constantly, waiting for the call or message that would signal the unraveling of Nathan and Rachel's deceit. But nothing came. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows on the ground, Tyler spoke up. "Do you think it worked?" I nodded, a grim sense of satisfaction settling in. "Oh, it worked. Tomorrow, their little secret won't be so secret anymore." And with that, we packed up, leaving the serenity of the picnic spot behind. I was ready to face the consequences of my actions, ready to watch as the lives of those who had wronged me came crashing down. The following morning, I woke up to a sense of eerie calmness, the kind that often precedes a storm. Today was the day everything would come to light. Today, Nathan and Rachel's deceit would be exposed for all to see. I drove back home, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. As I approached the house, I saw Rachel's car still parked in the driveway. A sly smile crept across my face. They had taken the bait. I entered the house, the silence greeting me like an old friend. No sign of Nathan or Rachel upstairs. I made my way to the basement door, my steps deliberate. The moment of truth was upon us. As I opened the door, the scene that unfolded before me was more satisfying than I had dared to hope. There they were, Rachel and Nathan, disheveled and frantic, realizing their secret rendezvous had turned into a humiliating trap. "Claire!" Rachel exclaimed, her voice a mix of surprise and fear. "Oh my God, we were locked in here. It was an accident." Nathan stood there, silent, his eyes avoiding mine. The guilt was written all over his face, confirming what I already knew. "An accident? Really, Rachel? You expect me to believe that?" I sneered, my voice dripping with contempt. Nathan finally spoke, his voice weak. "Claire, I'm so sorry. It's not what you think." I laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Not what I think. I think it's exactly what it looks like. My husband and my sister betraying me in my own home." Rachel stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Claire, please, you have to understand. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." "A moment of weakness?" I echoed, my anger boiling over. "No, Rachel, this was a choice to betray your own family." Nathan reached out, attempting to touch my arm. I recoiled as if his touch burned. "Don't you dare," I hissed. "You've lost the right to touch me, to even speak to me." I could see the shame in his eyes, the realization of what he had lost dawning on him. But it was too late. The damage was done. "Get out," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Get out of my house, out of my life. I never want to see either of you again." Rachel sobbed, her cries echoing in the empty basement. "Claire, please, I'm your sister." "You were my sister," I corrected her, my voice void of any warmth. "Not anymore." With that, I turned and left them there, their pleas and apologies fading into the background. I had done it. I had exposed their betrayal, and in doing so I had reclaimed my power, my dignity. But as I closed the door behind me, a wave of sadness washed over me. My marriage, my family, the life I had built, it was all in ruins. And yet there was a strange sense of freedom in that destruction, a chance to start anew, to build a life that was truly mine. As I sat in my living room, the silence no longer felt oppressive. It felt like a blank canvas, waiting for me to paint my new beginning. The aftermath of the confrontation left a bitter taste in my mouth. As much as I yearned for justice and retribution, nothing prepared me for the hollow victory that followed. My home, once a haven of love and warmth, now felt like a barren wasteland tainted with betrayal. I was in the midst of packing Nathan's belongings when my phone rang. The caller ID flashed a number I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I answered, "Hello? Mrs. Montgomery? This is Officer Daniels from the local police department. We've received a complaint about a domestic disturbance at your address. Is everything all right?" My heart skipped a beat. So it had come to this. Nathan or Rachel must have reached out to the authorities. I composed myself. "Yes, everything is fine now. There was a misunderstanding, but it's been resolved." "Are you sure, ma'am? We can have officers come by to ensure your safety." "No, that won't be necessary. Thank you, officer." I hung up, my mind racing. This was far from over. The scandal of our family drama was now a matter of public record. I wasn't surprised when the gossip started. Whispers at the grocery store, pointed looks from neighbors. The once friendly community had its claws out, ready to pounce on the latest piece of juicy news. But I refused to be cowed. I walked with my head held high, refusing to give in to the shame that others expected me to feel. I was the victim, but I refused to play that role in their sordid drama. The real blow came a few days later. Tyler came to visit, his face etched with worry. "Aunt Claire, I heard my mom and Nathan are spreading rumors about you, saying you locked them in the basement out of jealousy." Anger flared within me. Jealousy? They have the audacity to twist the story? Tyler nodded, his eyes filled with anger. "They're playing the victims, saying you've gone crazy with jealousy and paranoia." I laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Let them talk. I know the truth, and so do you. Their lies will catch up to them." But as days turned into weeks, the weight of the scandal began to take its toll. Friends distanced themselves, and even some family members questioned my actions. The isolation was suffocating, a constant reminder of the price of my revenge. In a desperate bid for some semblance of normalcy, I reached out to a divorce attorney. It was time to sever all legal ties with Nathan and reclaim my life. The attorney, a sharp-witted woman named Miss Harper, listened to my story with a mix of sympathy and professional detachment. "Mrs. Montgomery, while I understand your need for a quick resolution, I must warn you. This will be a messy divorce, especially with the allegations flying around. Are you prepared for that?" I nodded, determination stealing my resolve. "I want to move on, Miss Harper. I want to close this chapter of my life for good." As I left her office, a plan began to form in my mind. Nathan and Rachel wanted to paint me as the villain? Fine. I would give them a performance they'd never forget. I would emerge from this scandal not as a broken, scorned wife, but as a woman reborn, stronger and more resilient than ever. The days leading up to the divorce proceedings were like navigating through a minefield. Every step I took was met with criticism and judgment from those around me. But I was resolute. I refused to let Nathan and Rachel's deceit destroy me. The day of the first hearing arrived. Dressed in my best suit, I walked into the courtroom, my head held high. Nathan was already there, looking haggard and remorseful. Rachel wasn't present, but her absence did nothing to quell the sense of betrayal that simmered within me. "Mrs. Montgomery," my lawyer, Miss Harper, whispered as we took our seats. "Remember, stay calm and collected. Let him dig his own grave." Nathan's lawyer was the first to speak, painting Nathan as a victim of my supposed irrational jealousy. Mrs. Montgomery's actions were driven by unfounded suspicions and jealousy. Locking my client in a basement is not only unlawful, but also speaks to her unstable state of mind. I felt my blood boil, but I remembered Miss Harper's words. I remained silent, letting them spin their tale. Then it was our turn. Miss Harper was methodical, her words sharp and precise. My client acted out of self-defense, the evidence of Mr. Howe. Montgomery's infidelity is clear, and Mrs. Montgomery's actions, while extreme, were a result of emotional distress caused by this betrayal. The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. After what seemed like hours, he finally spoke. Given the circumstances, I believe a fair settlement is in order. Mrs. Montgomery will have full custody of their son, Ethan, and Mr. Montgomery will provide alimony and child support. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Nathan's eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of anger and regret. "Claire, please," he began, but I cut him off. "There's nothing left to say, Nathan. You made your choice." As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt the weight of the past few months start to lift. But the battle wasn't over yet. The social fallout from the scandal continued to plague me. Friends I once considered close turned their backs, siding with Nathan and Rachel's twisted narrative. I found solace in Tyler, who had become a frequent visitor. He, too, was struggling with the backlash, especially from Rachel's side of the family. "They're calling you a monster," Tyler said one evening, anger lacing his voice. "But they don't know the truth. They don't know her like we do." I sighed, feeling a kinship with Tyler that went beyond family ties. Let them talk, Tyler. We know the truth, and that's all that matters. But even with the legal battle won, a sense of unease lingered. Rachel was still out there, spinning her web of lies, and I knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. I needed to be vigilant, ready for whatever she had planned. As I lay in bed that night, I realized that this was far from over. The divorce was just the first step in reclaiming my life. But to truly move on, I needed to face Rachel and put an end to her manipulative games once and for all. The final chapter of my marital saga began on a crisp autumn morning. The leaves had turned a fiery orange, mirroring the burning resolve within me to confront Rachel and end this once and for all. I had arranged to meet her at a local cafe, a neutral ground where we could talk without the shadows of the past looming over us. As I waited, my mind raced with the possible outcomes of this confrontation. Rachel arrived, her demeanor a mixture of defiance and nervousness. "So you wanted to see me?" she began, her voice laced with a feigned casualness. I looked her straight in the eyes, my gaze steady. "Yes, Rachel, it's time we put an end to this," she scoffed. "Put an end? Claire, you've ruined everything. Your paranoia, your crazy accusations." I felt a surge of anger but quickly quelled it. "No, Rachel, you ruined everything. Your selfishness, your betrayal. You destroyed our family for your own desires." Rachel's facade cracked, her eyes flashing with anger. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? Always playing the victim. But you're not innocent in all this. You pushed Nathan away, and I was there for him." I shook my head in disbelief. "You call sleeping with my husband being there for him? You're delusional, Rachel." The conversation escalated, each word we exchanged sharper than the last. But as the argument wore on, I felt a strange sense of detachment. This was no longer about winning an argument or proving a point. This was about closure. Finally, I leaned back, my decision clear in my mind. "You know what, Rachel? I'm done. I'm done letting you and Nathan dictate my life. I'm moving on, and I suggest you do the same." Rachel's face twisted into a sneer. "Move on? After everything you've done?" "Yes, move on," I affirmed. "I've been granted full custody of Ethan, and Nathan is providing alimony and child support. The divorce is final. It's over, Rachel." She was visibly shaken, her bravado crumbling. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you can just walk away from this?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "Yes, I'm walking away. From you, from Nathan, from this entire mess. I'm starting fresh, for Ethan and for myself." Rachel watched me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. But I didn't linger on her expression. I walked out of the cafe, leaving her in the past behind. In the weeks that followed, I found a new sense of peace. I focused on rebuilding my life, on being there for Ethan, who had been my rock through this entire ordeal. We moved to a new neighborhood, a fresh start away from the judging eyes and whispered rumors. I landed a new job, found new friends, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined me. As I watched Ethan play in our new backyard, laughter filling the air, I realized that this was what mattered. This was my new beginning. My chance to write a new story, one where I was no longer a victim, but a survivor, a woman reborn from the ashes of her past. And as the sun set, casting a warm glow over our new home, I knew that, despite everything, I had emerged stronger, ready to face whatever life had in store for me. I'm not your ATM, Vanessa. This has to stop. The confrontation erupted in our once peaceful living room. I, Jenna, stood defiantly before my mother-in-law, Vanessa, and my husband, Ethan. Vanessa lounged on the couch, her face a twisted mixture of surprise and contempt, while Ethan lingered awkwardly, his expression blank. This is my son's house, Jenna. I'll spend as I please. Vanessa snapped back, her voice cold and dismissive. It felt like a bad dream. Ethan and I had begun our journey together, filled with dreams and love, but those days were now just a distant echo. The man I had married, once so loving and understanding, had transformed into someone unrecognizable, parroting his mother's harsh words and ignoring my pleas. Ethan, you see this, right? You understand how wrong this is? I implored, turning to my husband, desperate for an ally. But Ethan just shrugged, his eyes void of the connection we once shared. Jenna, she's my mother. What do you expect me to do? He uttered, his voice empty of the affection that once comforted me. Realization washed over me like a cold shower. I was alone in this battle. To them, I was merely a means to an end, a dispensable part of their twisted family dynamic. I knew I had to break free. All right, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I'll leave. And Ethan, we're done. I want a divorce. The room fell into a tense silence, the gravity of my words settling like dust. Ethan's face registered shock, a fleeting glimpse of the man I once fell in love with, but it quickly faded, replaced by an emotionless mask. Fine, Jenna, what you need to, but don't think you're walking away with anything, he responded, his tone icy. I walked to the door, each step lighter than the last, leaving behind the oppressive weight of this house. Vanessa's voice, laced with malice, trailed after me. Goodbye, Jenna. We'll be just fine without your drama. I didn't glance back. Exiting that house marked the end of a painful chapter and the beginning of an uncertain yet liberating journey. The cool evening breeze felt like freedom, washing over me with promises of a new beginning. I had no clear plan for what lay ahead, but I was certain of one thing. I would never allow myself to be diminished or disrespected again. This was the start of my story, on my own terms. Walking away from Ethan and Vanessa, my mind involuntarily drifted back to the beginnings of our story, contrasting sharply with the bitter end. I first met Ethan at work, where his charm and wit quickly captivated me. Our office romance blossomed into a deep connection, or so I thought. We shared dreams of a future together, dreams that now lay shattered at my feet. Our courtship was a whirlwind of affection and promises. Ethan often spoke of his difficult upbringing, raised solely by Vanessa after his father's departure. I saw a vulnerability in him that resonated with me, as I too had faced my share of hardships. But the Ethan I knew then was not the man I had just left behind. The first warning sign came the day I met Vanessa. Her demeanor was cold, her words sharp. Ethan could do better, she had said, scrutinizing me with a judgmental gaze. Ethan, instead of defending me, chuckled nervously and changed the subject. I brushed it off, attributing it to first meeting nerves. How wrong I was. Our wedding plans were modest, but Ethan's excitement was palpable. He wanted a big celebration, to make up for the lackluster moments of his childhood. I admired his desire to turn past pains into joyful memories. But as the wedding drew closer, our differences became more pronounced. I had risen to a managerial position at work, a fact that Ethan initially celebrated. But soon his support turned to envy. Conversations about my work achievements became strained, and Ethan's demeanor grew cold. He started suggesting I should leave my job to focus on our home life, echoing Vanessa's archaic views on marriage. Then came the ultimatum. You need to choose, Jenna. Your career or our family, Ethan said one evening, his tone unyielding. But why can't I have both? Why does it have to be a choice? I responded, bewildered by his demand. Vanessa, who had increasingly become a permanent fixture in our home, chimed in. A woman's place is in the home, Jenna. You're neglecting your duties as a wife. Their words stung like a slap. I realized then that their vision of our future was vastly different from mine. They wanted a version of me that fit their narrow expectations, a version I could never be. The final straw was Ethan's announcement of Vanessa moving in with us permanently. A decision made without my consent, a blatant disregard for our partnership. I felt like a stranger in my own home, my opinions and feelings irrelevant. As these memories flooded back, anger and hurt surged within me. How could I have been so blind? How could I have ignored the glaring signs of Ethan's inability to stand up to Vanessa? I was nothing more than a means to an end for them, a convenient addition to their twisted family dynamic. But no more. The Jenna that walked away from that house was not the same one who entered it. I was stronger now, wiser, and fueled by a desire for retribution. Ethan and Vanessa would soon learn that their actions had consequences they could never have anticipated. I was determined to make them pay for every tear, every moment of self-doubt they had caused me. My journey of revenge had just begun. The days following my departure from Ethan and Vanessa's grip were a blur of emotions. As I navigated my newfound freedom, the memory of Vanessa moving into our home replayed in my mind, marking the beginning of my unraveling. It was a sunny afternoon when Ethan casually mentioned his mother would be staying with us for a while. The news caught me off guard, but I tried to remain understanding. Vanessa had always been a looming presence in our marriage, but living with her was a challenge I hadn't anticipated. From the day she arrived, Vanessa made it clear that she considered the house her domain. This place could use a woman's touch, and clearly, "You're not up to the task, Jenna," she remarked on her first day, eyeing the decor disdainfully. Her criticism wasn't limited to the house. She found fault in everything I did, from my cooking to the way I dressed. "Ethan, how do you tolerate such bland meals?" she would say, scrunching her nose at the dinners I prepared. Ethan, instead of defending me, would nod in agreement, his silence a dagger to my heart. Her extravagant spending was the most egregious. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and lavish parties became the norm. She used the money I earned as though it were hers by right. "A little luxury never hurt anyone, Jenna. You should try it sometime. Maybe then you'd understand," Vanessa sneered one evening, flaunting her new diamond necklace. I tried discussing this with Ethan, but he dismissed my concerns. "Mom's had a tough life, Jenna. She deserves to enjoy herself," he said, ignoring the financial strain her indulgences put on us. The situation reached a boiling point when Vanessa decided to renovate the kitchen without consulting me. "It's just so outdated, Jenna. We need a space more fitting for our lifestyle," she declared, as contractors roamed our home estimating costs. "But this is our home, not just yours. You can't just make these decisions without talking to us." I protested, my frustration boiling over. Vanessa laughed, a cold, harsh sound that echoed in the hollow space that used to be my sanctuary. "Oh, Jenna, when will you learn? This is my son's house, and what I say goes. You're just living here." Ethan's response, or lack thereof, shattered any remaining illusions I had about our relationship. He stood by, a passive observer, as his mother bulldozed over my feelings and our shared life. That night, lying in bed, I realized the full extent of their betrayal. They didn't see me as a partner or even a person. I was just a convenient accessory in their lives, easily discarded and replaced. But I refused to be a victim any longer. As Vanessa's words echoed in my head, a plan began to form. They thought they could control me, use me for their own gain, but they were gravely mistaken. I would take back control, reclaim my life, and in doing so, I would ensure that Vanessa and Ethan felt the sting of their actions, a sting that would leave a lasting mark. My revenge would be meticulous, calculated, and, most importantly, deserved. They had underestimated me for the last time. The weeks that followed were a crescendo of tension and silent battles. Living under the same roof with Ethan and Vanessa, I felt like a stranger in a home that once held the promise of love and companionship. But the true tipping point came unexpectedly, on a day that should have been about celebration, my birthday. The morning of my birthday, I woke up to an empty house. There were no signs of celebration, not even a note. I tried to brush off the disappointment, reminding myself that expecting anything from Ethan and Vanessa was futile. The day dragged on with an eerie quietness until the evening when even Ethan and Vanessa returned, bubbling with excitement. "We have great news. Jenna!" Ethan exclaimed as they barged in, ignoring my evident dejection. Vanessa's eyes sparkled with a malicious glee. "We're going on a trip, a week in the Bahamas. Just think of the sun, the beaches, the luxury." I stood there, dumbfounded. "You're going on a trip? On my birthday? You didn't even remember." Ethan waved off my shock. "Oh, is it today? Well, happy birthday then. But listen, this trip is going to be amazing. Mom and I have been planning it for weeks." Vanessa chimed in. her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "Oh, Jenna, don't be so childish. Birthdays are just another day. Besides, you should be happy for us. We deserve this break." Their blatant disregard for me, on what should have been a special day, was the final straw. Anger bubbled inside me, a fiery blend of betrayal and hurt. "You're using my money for this trip, aren't you? The money I work hard for." Ethan shrugged, a dismissive gesture that ignited my fury. "Well, someone has to pay for it, and since you're the only one working—" Vanessa laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Honestly, Jenna, you should be grateful. We're spending your money on something worthwhile. It's not like you have any better use for it." Their words hit me like a physical blow. The audacity to use my hard-earned money for their frivolous pleasures while disregarding my feelings was appalling. I realized then that I was nothing more than a financial resource to them, a means to fund their lavish desires. "I can't believe this. You two are unbelievable," I shouted, my voice trembling with rage. "Calm down, Jenna. It's just money, and it's not like you're doing anything important with it," Ethan said, his tone patronizing. Vanessa smirked, adding insult to injury. "Exactly. Be a good wife and support your husband and his mother. That's your role, after all." Their words echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder of how little they valued me. But their smug faces, their condescending tones ignited something within me. A resolve, a burning desire for retribution. "This is it. I'm done. I refuse to be your personal ATM, your doormat." "You'll regret treating me this way," I vowed, my voice steady with newfound determination. Ethan and Vanessa exchanged amused glances, clearly underestimating the depth of my resolve. But I knew, at that moment, that my journey of revenge had truly begun. They had pushed me to my limits, and now they would face the consequences of their actions. In the days following my decision, I moved into a modest hotel, a temporary sanctuary as I plotted my next steps. The betrayal by Ethan and Vanessa had left a bitter taste, but it also fueled a fire within me, a desire to reclaim my life and exact revenge. I began by consulting a lawyer, meticulously laying out the years of financial exploitation and emotional abuse. The lawyer listened intently, occasionally nodding, his expression a mix of disbelief and sympathy. "We have a strong case here, Jenna. It's clear that you've been taken advantage of. Let's start with filing for divorce and freezing the joint accounts," he suggested. With each step, I felt a piece of my old self return. The Jenna who was confident, who wouldn't let anyone walk over her. I was no longer the woman who tolerated disrespect and manipulation. A few weeks into my hotel stay, my phone rang. It was Ethan, his voice laced with panic. "Jenna, where are you? The bank accounts are frozen, and we can't access any funds." I couldn't help but smile, a cold, satisfying grin. "Oh, Ethan, I'm taking back what's mine. You and your mother can't use me as your personal cash machine anymore." There was a pause, and then Ethan's voice grew desperate. "Jenna, please, you're overreacting. Let's talk about this. We're a family, after all." Family. The word echoed mockingly in my ears. "No, Ethan, we were never a family. You chose your mother over your wife, and now you must face the consequences." As I ended the call, a sense of empowerment washed over me. This was just the beginning. Vanessa and Ethan had underestimated me for far too long. They thought they could control and use me, but I was about to show them just how wrong they were. The next phase of my plan involved exposing their true characters. I reached out to mutual friends and colleagues, sharing my story. The reactions were a mix of shock and support. "I always knew Vanessa was difficult, but I had no idea it was this bad," a former colleague said, her voice filled with indignation. Word spread, and soon Ethan and Vanessa's social standing began to crumble. Invitations dwindled, and their once bustling social life faltered. I watched from the sidelines, a bittersweet satisfaction in seeing them isolated, a taste of their own medicine. But the true revenge was yet to come. I had one last card to play, one that would ensure Ethan and Vanessa would never forget the price of their actions. The final move was a legal stroke of genius. Through my lawyer, I initiated a case to claim back the funds Vanessa had squandered. The evidence was overwhelming, and the law was on my side. The day we received the court's decision in my favor was the day I truly felt vindicated. Ethan's pleas for forgiveness and Vanessa's attempts to negotiate fell on deaf ears. They had made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. The financial strain was just a start. I wanted them to feel the same helplessness and despair they had subjected me to. As I prepared to leave the hotel and start anew, I knew that the path ahead would be challenging. But I also knew that I was no longer the same woman who walked into this situation. I was stronger, wiser, and most importantly, free. The day of reckoning had arrived. After weeks of meticulous planning and legal maneuvering, I was ready to confront Ethan and Vanessa directly. I had arranged a meeting under the guise of discussing the divorce and settlement. As I entered the cafe where we agreed to meet, I saw them sitting there, a picture of anxiety. Vanessa's face, usually so composed, was etched with worry. Ethan looked up as I approached, his eyes searching for a sign of leniency. "Jenna, thank you for agreeing to meet," Ethan started, his voice unsteady. "Look, I know things got out of hand, but we're family. Can't we just put this behind us and start over?" I couldn't help but scoff at his audacity. "Start over? After everything you and your mother have done? You must be joking." Vanessa interjected, her tone a mix of desperation and cunning. "Jenna, dear, let's be reasonable. We all made mistakes, but we can work this out. We're willing to make amends." Their pleas were a stark contrast to their earlier arrogance. It was satisfying to see them squirm, to witness the shift in power. Mistakes? You call years of manipulation and financial abuse a mistake? I retorted, my voice firm. You two have shown no remorse for your actions. Now, you will face the consequences. Ethan's face paled, a realization dawning on him. Jenna, please, we need the money, the lifestyle, the reputation. We can't lose everything. Vanessa, ever the manipulator, tried a different approach. Think about what's best for all of us, Jenna. We can still be a family. Isn't that worth more than revenge? But their words fell on deaf ears. I had seen their true colors, and there was no going back. This is no longer about money or reputation, I said, my resolve unwavering. It's about justice. You will both pay for what you've done. The court has ruled in my favor, and you will comply with its decision. The look of defeat on their faces was the vindication I had sought for so long. I stood up, ready to leave the past behind. This is where our paths diverge, Ethan and Vanessa. I hope the lessons you learn from this are profound and lasting. Goodbye. As I walked away, I didn't look back. I had turned the tables on them, reclaimed my dignity and independence. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. Ethan and Vanessa were now just a part of my past, a painful chapter that had come to a close. In the aftermath of my final encounter with Ethan and Vanessa, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The chapter of my life dominated by their deceit and manipulation was closed, but the journey ahead was mine to chart. The taste of victory was sweet, yet it bore the complexity of hard-earned lessons. I had moved into a new apartment, a space that was entirely my own. The walls were yet to be decorated. The rooms still echoed with the newness, but it was a sanctuary of peace and freedom. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my destiny. Word of Ethan and Vanessa's downfall spread quickly. Their once prestigious social circle had crumbled, leaving them isolated and disgraced. The lavish lifestyle they had so greedily pursued was now a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of their actions. But the true reward of my journey was not in their downfall. It was in the reclaiming of my identity and the rebuilding of my life. My career, which had once been a point of contention in our marriage, flourished. I was promoted, recognized for my resilience and dedication. Colleagues who had heard of my ordeal expressed admiration and support, further fueling my drive to succeed. I often found myself reflecting on the journey. The pain and betrayal had been real, but so was the strength I discovered within myself. I had faced my fears, stood up against injustice, and emerged victorious. The final twist of fate came unexpectedly one day. As I sipped coffee in a cafe, the same one where I had last seen Ethan and Vanessa, I overheard a conversation at the next table. It was about them. They were struggling, facing legal battles and financial ruin. Vanessa, once so proud and haughty, was now a shadow of her former self, humbled by the consequences of her greed and manipulation. As I listened, I felt no joy in their suffering. Instead, I felt a sense of closure. My revenge had been served, justice had been meted out, but I no longer dwelled in the past. They were a chapter closed, a lesson learned. I finished my coffee and stepped out into the sunlight, feeling its warmth on my face. The world around me seemed brighter, filled with possibilities. I had survived the storm and was now basking in the calm that followed. As I walked down the street, I realized that my story was not defined by Ethan and Vanessa, nor by the pain they had caused. My story was about resilience, about rising from the ashes and forging a path of my own. I smiled, embracing the future with open arms. The road ahead was mine to travel, filled with hope, opportunities, and the promise of new beginnings. The phone rang with an urgency that sliced through the calm of my modest home office. Glancing at the unknown number on the screen, I hesitated but eventually answered. Claire Harmon speaking. Your daughter's wedding is starting. Hurry up and come. A gruff voice blurted out, sending a shiver down my spine. I think you have the wrong number. My daughter Ava is still in college, I replied, my voice steady despite the confusion swirling in my head. No mistake, Claire. It's me, Richard. Richard. The name alone was enough to stir a maelstrom of emotions within me. 15 years had passed since our bitter divorce, since he had callously abandoned Ava and me for his mistress. Now he was calling about a wedding? It had to be some sick joke. Richard, this is nonsense. What are you talking about? Just get here, White Garden Chapel, and hurry, he said, and the line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. Ava, who had been studying in the living room, looked up, her eyes filled with concern. Mom, is everything okay? Just an old ghost, nothing to worry about, I said, forcing a smile. But inside, a storm was brewing. As I sat down, memories I had long buried began to resurface. 15 years ago, life was a picture-perfect portrait. A loving husband, a beautiful daughter, a comfortable home. But then Richard tore that portrait to shreds. I had been a part-time librarian back then, content with my quiet life. Richard, on the other hand, was poised to take over his family's lucrative business. We had never struggled financially, but that wasn't enough for him. The late nights, the weekend meetings, the growing distance, they were all signs I had chosen to ignore. Then came the day he coldly announced his affair and his plans to remarry. I've found someone else. We're having a child, he had said without a hint of remorse. The revelation shattered my world. But worse was yet to come. He left, leaving me with nothing but a broken heart and a mountain of questions. How could he? Why didn't I see it coming? The divorce was swift, his wealthy family ensuring he got off without a hitch. I was left to pick up the pieces, to rebuild a life for Ava and me from scratch. The years that followed were a blur of struggle and determination. I worked day and night, slowly climbing my way up from a part-time librarian to the owner of a thriving online bookstore. Ava grew into a bright, strong-willed college student, my pride and joy. We had come so far, yet Richard's call threatened to unravel everything. I was pulled from my thoughts by Ava's voice. Mom, who was that, really? It was your father, I said, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. Ava's expression hardened. What does he want after all these years? He mentioned a wedding. His, perhaps, but it doesn't matter. We have our own lives now. Ava nodded, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. Richard's abandonment had left a void in her life, one that I had tried desperately to fill. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I couldn't shake the feeling that Richard's call was more than just a cruel reminder of the past. There was something sinister in his tone, something that told me this wasn't the end of it. As night fell and Ava retreated to her room, I sat alone in the living room, the ghosts of the past haunting me. Richard had moved on, had built a life without us. Why reach out now? What game was he playing? I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let Richard disrupt our lives again. We had come too far to be dragged back into his twisted world. Ava and I, we were survivors, and we would face whatever came our way, together. The phone rang again, jolting me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was Richard. Taking a deep breath, I answered, ready to confront the past. What do you want, Richard? Ah, Claire, finally ready to listen. Richard's voice oozed through the phone with a patronizing tone. I'm not here for games, Richard. What do you want? I replied, my grip tightening around the phone. It's simple. I need you at the White Garden Chapel. It's for our daughter's wedding. Our daughter? Ava is in college, Richard. What are you playing at? There was a pause, and then a chuckle. Not Ava, my other daughter. You know, the one I had with her. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. He had a daughter, almost Ava's age, and he dared to drag me into this farce. You must be out of your mind if you think I'll play along with your twisted fantasies, I spat out. Come on, Claire. I thought you'd enjoy the chance to show how well you've done without me. Plus, it'll be good for Ava to see what she missed out on. His words stung, but I refused to let him see my pain. Ava hasn't missed out on anything, Richard. She's better off without a father like you. The line went silent for a moment before Richard's voice came back, colder this time. You'll regret this, Claire. I always get what I want, one way or another. The call ended abruptly, leaving me in a state of shock and anger. How dare he? After all these years, he still had the audacity to try and manipulate me. I couldn't let this go. Not this time. It was clear that Richard hadn't changed, and now he was dragging another innocent child into his web of lies. I had to protect Ava and myself from his vindictive games. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called an old friend who had become a private investigator. Tom, I need a favor. Can you find out everything about Richard's other daughter? I need to know what he's planning. Tom agreed without hesitation, understanding the urgency in my voice. Meanwhile, Ava, sensing something was amiss, confronted me. Mom, what's going on? Why are you so worried all of a sudden? I hesitated, not wanting to involve her in Richard's mess, but she deserved the truth. Ava, your father called yesterday. He claims he's getting his other daughter married and wanted me there. Ava's face contorted with a mix of anger and disbelief. He's unbelievable. What are you going to do? I'm going to find out what he's up to. But I need you to promise me something, Ava. Stay out of this. I don't want you getting hurt. Ava nodded reluctantly, her eyes filled with a fire that reminded me so much of myself at her age. Over the next few days, Tom's investigation unearthed disturbing details. Richard's new family was a facade. His business was failing, and his marriage was on the rocks. The wedding was a desperate attempt to maintain appearances, and he wanted me there to further his own agenda. Armed with this information, I knew I had to act. It was time to confront Richard and end his manipulations once and for all. I decided to go to the White Garden Chapel, not to participate in his charade, but to expose it. As I drove to the chapel, my mind raced with possibilities. What would I say? How would he react? But deep down, I knew it didn't matter. I was doing this for Ava, for myself, and for the innocent daughter Richard had dragged into his deceitful world. I arrived at the chapel, steeling myself for the confrontation. It was time to face Richard and the past he represented. Today, I would finally break free from his shadow and protect my family from his destructive influence. As I stepped into the White Garden Chapel, the lavish decor couldn't mask the underlying tension in the air. Richard stood at the front, his face a mix of surprise and annoyance upon seeing me. "Claire, you actually came. How unexpected," he sneered. "I'm not here for your games, Richard. I know about your failing business and sham of a marriage. What are you really up to?" His smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of anger. "Always so clever, aren't you? Well, since you're here, why not play along? For old time's sake. I'm not one of your pawns, Richard, and neither is our daughter. What about this other daughter of yours? Does she know about your lies?" Richard's facade of control was slipping. "You always were too nosy for your own good. Yes, my business is struggling, but this wedding will secure a deal that'll save it. All you need to do is stand there and look pretty." "Look pretty? For your business deal?" I couldn't hide my disgust. "You're using your own daughter's wedding as a business transaction? That's low, even for you." He stepped closer, his voice a menacing whisper. "You have no idea what it takes to maintain a lifestyle like mine. You were always too simple to understand." "Simple? I've built a life for Ava and me without stooping to deceit and manipulation. You're pathetic, Richard." His eyes narrowed. "Watch your mouth, Claire. You're in my world now." Just then, a young woman, presumably Richard's other daughter, approached us. Her expression was a mix of confusion and hurt. "Dad, what's going on? Who is she?" "This is Claire, an old friend. Don't mind her, she was just leaving," Richard said, attempting to regain his composure. "No, she's not just leaving," the young woman protested. "She looks upset. What did you do, Dad?" Richard's mask was finally crumbling. "Nothing, it's just business." I looked at the young woman, seeing a reflection of Ava in her. "I'm sorry you're caught up in this. Your father's not the man you think he is. Enough, Claire. Richard barked. "Leave now, or I'll make you regret it." "I'm not afraid of you, Richard, but I won't stoop to your level. I'm leaving, but not because you told me to. I'm leaving because there's nothing here for me." As I turned to leave, Richard's voice followed me, laced with malice. "You'll pay for this, Claire, you and your daughter." Outside, the cool air did little to calm my raging thoughts. Richard's threat lingered in my mind. I knew then that this wasn't over. I had to protect Ava and expose Richard for who he truly was. Driving home, my resolve hardened. Richard had thrown down the gauntlet, and I was ready to pick it up. It was time for his reign of manipulation and deceit to end. For Ava's sake, for my sake, and for the sake of the young woman who deserved a father far better than Richard. Back at home, I relayed the day's events to Ava. Her reaction was a mix of anger and determination. "We can't let him get away with this, Mom. He's not just a liar, he's dangerous." "I know, Ava, and I have a plan. But it's risky, and I need you to trust me." Ava nodded, her eyes reflecting the fire of resolve. "Whatever it takes, Mom." Over the next few days, I pored over Richard's business dealings, thanks to some discreet inquiries by Tom. The picture that emerged was one of desperation and deceit. Richard's company was on the verge of bankruptcy, and his personal life was no better. His second marriage was crumbling, just like his first. Armed with this information, I reached out to Richard's business partners, carefully planting seeds of doubt about his stability and trustworthiness. It was a subtle campaign, but effective. Soon, whispers of Richard's impending downfall began to circulate in his social circles. Meanwhile, Ava took to social media, skillfully crafting posts that highlighted Richard's unethical practices, being careful not to mention him directly. It wasn't long before the posts went viral, adding to the growing storm around Richard. The final blow came when I anonymously tipped off a local journalist about Richard's shady dealings. The subsequent article was a damning expose that sent ripples through the community. As Richard's world began to crumble, he became increasingly erratic. He called me one evening. His voice barely contained fury. "What have you done, Claire? You're ruining me." "I haven't done anything, Richard. You're the architect of your own downfall. You think you're so clever, but you're nothing. I'll destroy you and your precious daughter." "Threats, Richard, really? That's all you have left?" I said, my voice steady despite the chill his words sent down my spine. "You haven't seen the last of me, Claire. I'll make sure you regret this." But his threats were empty, his power waning. The community turned against him, his business partners withdrew their support, and his social standing evaporated. Richard had become a pariah, undone by his own actions. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Richard's company declared bankruptcy, and his wife filed for divorce. He tried to reach out to Ava, perhaps seeking some form of redemption, but she refused to engage with him. "You did it, Mom. You brought him down," Ava said one evening as we sat in our living room, the weight of the past months finally lifting. "We did it, Ava, together." But even as we celebrated our victory, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. Richard had been a part of my life, once a source of love and happiness. It was a tragic end to a chapter that had started with so much promise. In the quiet aftermath of Richard's downfall, Ava and I found ourselves in a reflective mood. Our living room, once a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world, now felt too silent, too still. "Mom, do you think we went too far?" Ava asked one evening, her eyes searching mine for answers I wasn't sure I had. I sighed, the weight of her question heavy on my shoulders. "Richard brought this on himself, Ava. We just accelerated the inevitable." "I know, but I can't help feeling guilty. We've essentially ruined a man's life." "He ruined his own life, Ava. We just exposed the truth." I paused, my thoughts drifting. "But I understand what you're feeling. There's no joy in seeing someone's life crumble, even if they deserve it." Ava nodded, her expression somber. "What now, Mom? What do we do with all this emptiness?" "We rebuild, Ava. We fill our lives with new memories, new joys. We've been given a chance to start afresh, free from Richard's shadow." The conversation lingered in the air as we both retreated into our own thoughts. The weeks that followed were a time of healing and reflection. We focused on our business, which had thrived amidst the chaos, and on strengthening our bond, which had been tested but not broken. But just when we thought we could close the chapter on Richard, fate had one more twist in store. A knock on our door one rainy evening revealed a young woman, drenched and shivering. Richard's other daughter, the one he had used as a pawn in his twisted games. "Miss Harmon? I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Elise, Richard's daughter. I didn't know where else to go." Her appearance was a shock, but I couldn't turn her away. "Come in, Elise. You're welcome here." As Elise settled in, wrapped in a warm blanket with a cup of tea in her hands, she shared her story. Richard had abandoned her and her mother, leaving them with nothing but debts and broken promises. "I'm sorry, Elise," Ava said, her voice filled with empathy. "We didn't know about you when we set out to expose your father." Elise shook her head, a tear trailing down her cheek. "No, you did what needed to be done. I'm just lost. I don't know what to do now." "We'll help you, Elise," I said, a resolve settling in my heart. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure this out together." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We helped Elise settle her father's debts and supported her in starting a new life. It was a time of healing, not just for Elise, but for Ava and me as well. We had extended our family, found a new purpose in our shared experiences. As I watched Ava and Elise laughing together one afternoon, a sense of peace filled me. We had come full circle, from victims of Richard's deceit to architects of our own destiny. Our lives were once again our own, richer and fuller for the trials we had endured. With Elise now part of our lives, our home buzzed with a new energy. It was refreshing, yet it came with its own set of challenges. Elise, carrying the scars of her father's neglect, often found herself grappling with complex emotions. One evening, as we gathered in the living room, Elise's facade of strength crumbled. "How do you do it?" she asked, her voice quivering. "How do you move past the anger, the betrayal?" Ava reached out, taking Elise's hand in hers. "It's not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. For years I hated my father for abandoning us, but eventually I realized that hate was only holding me back. I want to move on, but I feel so lost," Elise confessed, tears brimming in her eyes. "You're not alone, Elise," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You're part of this family now. We'll navigate this journey together." Our conversation that night was a turning point. It brought us closer, creating a bond forged from shared pain and mutual understanding. In the weeks that followed, we supported each other in ways big and small. Ava and Elise grew particularly close, finding solace in their shared experiences as daughters of the same flawed man. But just when we thought we had left the worst behind, Richard reappeared, a shadow from the past we thought we had escaped. He showed up at our doorstep one day, unannounced and unwanted. "Richard, what are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice cold. I need help," he stammered, a shadow of his former self. "I've lost everything. I have nowhere else to go." His appearance was pitiful, but I felt no sympathy. "You made your bed, Richard. Now you have to lie in it." "Please, Claire. I've changed. I realize now what I've done to you, to Ava, to Elise. I want to make amends." Elise stepped forward, her expression one of disbelief. "Make amends? After everything you've done? You abandoned us." Richard's eyes darted between us, desperation etched on his face. "I know I've made mistakes, but I'm your father. Doesn't that count for something?" "No, Richard. Being a father is more than just a title. It's about being there, about love and support. You've done none of that," I said firmly. Ava stood beside me, her stance resolute. "You need to leave, Richard. There's nothing for you here." Defeated, Richard turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the fading light of the day. Watching him go, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that he was finally out of our lives, and sadness for the man he could have been, the father he should have been. That night, we sat together, a family united not by blood, but by our shared experiences and newfound love for each other. We talked about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead. It was a future we would face together, stronger and more resilient than ever. In the weeks following Richard's departure, a sense of calm settled over our household. Ava, Elise, and I found comfort in our routine, each day bringing us closer and healing old wounds. We were a family, not by blood, but by choice, bound by our resilience and shared experiences. One evening, as we gathered for dinner, Elise broached a subject we had all been avoiding. "I've been thinking about my dad," she said hesitantly. "I know he's done terrible things, but he's still my father. I feel like I should do something, try to help him somehow." Ava reached across the table, squeezing Elise's hand. I understand how you feel, Elise, but remember, we can't fix him. He has to want to change, and right now, he doesn't. I know, Elise sighed. It's just hard to let go. It is, I agreed, but sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward. We've all been hurt by Richard, but we can't let him define our lives. The conversation lingered in the air, a reminder of the complex emotions we all harbored, yet it was also a testament to our strength and our ability to face difficult truths. In the days that followed, we focused on building our future. Ava excelled in her studies, her dreams of becoming a writer now within reach. Elise, with our support, enrolled in community college, determined to carve her own path. As for me, the bookstore continued to thrive, a symbol of my journey from a broken-hearted wife to a successful businesswoman and mother. But more than that, it was a place where Ava, Elise, and I could share our love for stories and dreams. One sunny afternoon, as we rearranged the bookstore, Ava looked up from a stack of books, a thoughtful expression on her face. Mom, Elise, I've been thinking. We've all been through so much, and we've come out stronger. What if we share our story? Write a book about it. Elise's eyes lit up. That's a great idea, Ava. Our story could inspire others who are going through tough times. I nodded, feeling a surge of pride. I think it's a wonderful idea. Let's do it. Let's tell our story, our way. And so we began. Nights were spent around the kitchen table, sharing memories, laughter, and tears as we penned our story. It was a cathartic experience, one that brought us even closer. Months later, as I held the first copy of our book, I felt a sense of accomplishment and closure. We had turned our pain into something beautiful, something that could potentially help others. As we prepared for the book launch, I looked at Ava and Elise, my heart full of love and gratitude. We had weathered the storm, and now we were ready to embrace the sunshine. Our story doesn't end here, I said, smiling at them. This is just the beginning, a new chapter in our lives. Ava and Elise smiled back, their eyes shining with hope and excitement for the future. Together, we stepped out into the world, ready to share our story and start a new journey. A journey filled with promise, love, and the unbreakable bond of a family forged in fire and tempered by time. In the quiet comfort of my childhood home, where each creaking floorboard holds a memory, I stand frozen, grappling with the words that just shattered the stillness. Gregory, my husband of 8 years, his face an unreadable mask, drops the bombshell that upends everything. Lydia, it's decided. Alara is moving in and your mother needs to go to a nursing home. If you're not okay with that, we can always divorce, he states coldly. Behind him, Alara, his sister, smirks with a venomous glee that chills me to the bone. Their cruelty, stark and unapologetic, feels like a physical blow. I've always believed in the sanctity of family, in the bonds that were supposed to be unbreakable. But here I am, watching those bonds fray and snap before my very eyes. My mother, frail and vulnerable since Dad's passing, has become a mere inconvenience in their scheme. Divorce? The word tastes bitter as I spit it out, disbelief lacing my voice. You'd throw away our marriage all for her? Gregory shrugs, his indifference a sharp contrast to the tempest raging inside me. Lydia, it's simple. Alara needs a place to stay, and frankly, your mother is just taking up space. We need to think practically. Practically? The audacity of his words stings. This house, brimming with decades of love and laughter, reduced to mere square footage in his eyes. I glance at my mother, sitting in her favorite armchair, a look of utter defeat etched on her face. The image of her being sent away, discarded like an old piece of furniture, ignites a fire within me. Fine, I say, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. If divorce is what you want, Gregory, then you'll have it. But know this, I will not let you toss my mother aside like she's nothing. Gregory's eyes widen in surprise. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to call his bluff. Alara's smirk falters, her confidence shaken. In that moment, a plan begins to form in my mind. A plan to not only escape this toxic marriage, but to expose their callousness for what it truly is. They think they can manipulate me, break me down, and cast aside the people I love most. They're sorely mistaken. As I head to my room, the words of my father echo in my mind, a mantra of strength and resilience. Never let anyone dim your light, Lydia. Stand tall, even in the darkest of times. Tonight, as I lay in bed, I'm not just planning a divorce. I'm planning a reckoning. Gregory and Alara have awakened a side of me they'll wish they hadn't. I'll protect my mother and our home, no matter what it takes. This is more than just a marital dispute. It's a battle for dignity, for respect, and for the sanctity of the home I've loved my whole life. They may have declared war, but I'm more than ready to fight back. The morning light filters through the curtains, casting a warm glow over what feels like the aftermath of a storm. Today, the battle lines are drawn. I'm not just fighting for my mother's dignity. I'm fighting for my own. I start the day with a phone call to a lawyer, my voice steady but my hands trembling. The lawyer, a woman named Miss Hernandez, listens intently as I explain the situation. "Mrs. Graham, we can start the divorce proceedings immediately," she assures me. "And regarding your mother, we'll ensure she stays right where she belongs." Her words are a balm, and for the first time since Gregory's ultimatum, I feel a flicker of hope. As I hang up, I'm met with the sight of Gregory and Alara in the kitchen, their laughter grating against my nerves. Alara, perched on a stool, is flipping through a magazine, while Gregory prepares breakfast with an air of forced normalcy. "Good morning, Lydia," Gregory says, his tone casual, as if our world hadn't just crumbled. "I've contacted a lawyer," I reply, my voice devoid of emotion. "We're getting a divorce, Gregory, and my mother is staying." Alara's eyes snap up from her magazine, her earlier smugness replaced by shock. "You're serious? You'd really throw away your marriage over this?" "Over this?" I echo, my anger simmering. "This is about respect, Alara, something you know nothing about." Gregory sets down the spatula, his face hardening. "You're being irrational, Lydia. You can't just—" "Irrational?" I cut him off. "No, Gregory. What's irrational is expecting me to abandon my mother for your sister's convenience." The tension in the room is palpable, a silent war raging with every word exchanged. My mother shuffles into the room, her presence a reminder of what's at stake. "Lydia, is everything all right?" she asks, her voice frail. "Everything's going to be fine, Mom," I assure her, my resolve strengthening. Gregory and Alara exchange a look, a silent conversation that speaks volumes. They had underestimated me, and now they're scrambling. In the following days, the house becomes a battlefield of silent glares and unspoken words. Alara's presence, once just an annoyance, now feels like a constant provocation. Every smug smile, every dismissive gesture, fuels my determination. The day I receive the divorce papers, my hands shake as I sign them. There's no joy in this victory, only a deep sense of loss for what could have been. But as I watch Gregory's face fall when I hand them to him, I feel a surge of empowerment. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" I say, my voice steady. "Freedom from us, from responsibility. Well, you've got it." Gregory's response is a mumbled excuse, a feeble attempt to justify his actions. But I'm done listening. I'm done being the one who bends. As I retreat to my room, the reality of what I've set in motion hits me. There's no turning back now, but in this moment of solitude, I don't feel fear or regret. I feel a fierce sense of pride. I am Lydia Graham, and I will not be broken. Not by Gregory, not by Alara, and certainly not by the cruel hand fate has dealt me. This is just the beginning. The real battle is yet to come, and I am ready for it. The days following the initiation of the divorce proceedings feel like navigating a minefield in what used to be my sanctuary. Gregory's aloofness and Alara's scornful glances are constant reminders of the battle I'm embroiled in. But I refuse to be intimidated in my own home. A week later, I'm sitting across from Miss Hernandez in her office, the divorce papers spread out like a map of a battlefield. "The good news," she begins, her eyes scanning the documents, "is that you have a strong case for keeping the house, especially given your mother's condition." I nod, a mixture of relief and sorrow washing over me. This house, once a symbol of familial warmth, has become the core of my struggle. "But," Miss Hernandez continues, "there's something unusual. It seems Gregory has significant debts, ones he's kept hidden." "Debts?" The word hits me like a wave. Gregory's secretive phone calls and sudden expenses now make a chilling sense. The realization that he's not only betrayed my trust but also endangered our financial security is a bitter pill to swallow. Can he claim the house because of these debts? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. It's unlikely, given the circumstances. But we need to be prepared, she replies, her tone firm yet reassuring. Armed with this new information, I return home, my mind racing. The sight of Alara lounging in the living room, her feet disrespectfully propped up on the coffee table, ignites my anger. "Enjoying yourself?" I ask, unable to mask my contempt. Alara looks up, her eyes cold. "Oh, I'm just getting comfortable. After all, it's going to be my home soon." Her smugness is like a slap in the face, but I stand my ground. "Actually, Alara, you might want to start looking for another place. The house isn't going to be part of the divorce settlement." Her smirk fades, replaced by a flicker of panic. "What do you mean?" Gregory said. "What Gregory said and what's legal are two different things," I cut her off. "And while we're at it, let's discuss your brother's hidden debts." Alara's face drains of color. "Debts? What are you talking about?" "Oh, don't play dumb, Alara. It's unbecoming," I retort. "Gregory's financial troubles are going to complicate things for both of you." For the first time since she arrived, I see uncertainty in Alara's eyes. The revelation of Gregory's debts seems to have shaken her confidence, her facade of control slipping. Gregory walks in at that moment, his face a mask of confusion. "Lydia, what's this about debts?" "Ask your brother, Alara. He seems to have been keeping secrets from both of us," I say, turning to leave the room. As I walk away, I can't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The tables are turning, and for once, Gregory and Alara are the ones caught off guard. But this is more than just a game of one-upmanship. It's about justice, about reclaiming my life and protecting my mother. Gregory and Alara may have thought they could control me, but they're about to learn just how wrong they were. The battle lines have been drawn, and I'm not just defending my ground, I'm advancing. The following days are a blur of cold exchanges and tense silences. Gregory's once familiar presence now feels like an oppressive cloud hanging over the house. Alara, though visibly shaken by the revelation of the debts, clings to her disdainful attitude. But their veneer of confidence is cracking, and I intend to shatter it. One evening, a week after my meeting with Miss Hernandez, I receive an unexpected phone call. It's from Posey, my mother-in-law. Her voice, usually laced with subtle barbs, now trembles with unease. "Lydia, we need to talk. Can you come over?" she asks, a note of desperation in her tone. The next day, I find myself at Gregory's parents' house, a place I had once considered a second home. The door opens, and Posey stands there, her usual poise replaced by a nervous fidgeting. "What is it, Posey? Why the sudden need to talk?" I ask, stepping inside. In the living room, the air is thick with tension. Posey wrings her hands, a clear sign of her anxiety. "Lydia, we heard about the divorce and the debts. Gregory never told us." "Seems he didn't tell anyone," I reply, my words sharp. Posey sighs, the weight of her son's actions bearing down on her. "Lydia, please, is there any way this can be resolved without all this mess?" I can't help but feel a bitter satisfaction at her discomfort. This was the woman who had subtly undermined me at every turn, who had always favored her son's whims over my well-being. "Posey, you're asking me to overlook your son's betrayal, his lies, and his attempt to throw my mother out of her own house. You think that can just be swept under the rug?" I demand, my voice rising. Posey flinches, the reality of my words hitting her hard. I didn't know about all that," she stammers. "That's the problem, Posey. You never knew, or perhaps never wanted to know. Gregory and Alara's actions are a reflection of what they've been taught, what they've been allowed to get away with," I say, my gaze unwavering. For a moment, Posey seems lost for words, the veneer of the matriarch crumbling before me. Then, with a heavy sigh, she speaks. I'm sorry, Lydia. I didn't realize." As I leave their house, Posey's apology echoing in my ears, I feel a complex mix of emotions. Anger, certainly, at the years of subtle jabs and favoritism, but also a sense of closure, of having spoken my truth to the woman who had, in many ways, enabled Gregory's behavior. This isn't just a victory in the battle of the divorce, it's a personal victory, a reclaiming of my voice and my worth. Gregory and Alara may have started this war, but I'm the one who's going to end it. And as I drive back to my house, to the life I'm fighting to protect, I know one thing for certain. I am not the same woman they thought they could control. I am stronger, fierier, and more determined than ever. The real battle is just beginning, and I am ready for it. The finalization of the divorce arrives like a storm, fierce and liberating. Gregory's signature on the papers is more than a legal formality. It's the end of a chapter filled with betrayal and the beginning of a new narrative written on my terms. In the aftermath, I find myself standing in the now quiet house, a sense of solemn victory washing over me. The property is mine, and my mother's place in her own home is secure. But the win is bittersweet. The house feels larger, emptier. Alara had moved out the day before the divorce was finalized, her departure marked by a sullen silence that was a stark contrast to her usual brashness. As she left, our eyes met, and for a fleeting second, I saw something that resembled regret. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the familiar scowl. In the weeks that follow, I focus on rebuilding. The house undergoes a transformation, each change a step towards reclaiming my space. Fresh paint, new curtains, and the removal of everything that reminds me of Gregory and Alara. My mother watches this process, her eyes reflecting a mix of sadness and relief. "Lydia, are you sure about all this?" she asks one evening, her voice tinged with concern. "I've never been more sure, Mom," I reply, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "This is our home, and it's time we made new memories here." But the past isn't ready to let go just yet. One evening, a knock on the door disrupts the newfound peace. Standing on the doorstep is Oswald, Gregory's father. His eyes are weary, his posture resigned. "Lydia, I need to talk to you," he says, his voice heavy. I lead him into the living room, offering a seat but not warmth. Oswald looks around, a sad smile playing on his lips. "This house, it's changed," he observes. "It needed to," I respond, my tone neutral. Oswald nods, understanding the unspoken words. "Lydia, I'm here to apologize. For Gregory, for Alara, and for how we treated you and your mother." His apology, sincere as it may be, doesn't erase the pain. But it's a start, a small step towards healing. Oswald talks about Gregory, about his failures and mistakes, painting a picture of a man lost in his own shortcomings. "I don't expect forgiveness, Lydia. I just wanted you to know that we see the pain we caused." Oswald says he stands to leave. His departure leaves me with a sense of closure, albeit a complicated one. The battle may be over, but the scars remain. Yet in their own way, they're a testament to my strength, to the journey I've undertaken. As I sit there, in the quiet aftermath of Oswald's visit, I realize that this battle has been about more than just a divorce or a house. It's been about finding my voice, about standing up for myself and my mother. And in doing so, I've discovered a resilience I never knew I had. The future is uncertain, but it's mine to shape. And whatever it holds, I know I'll face it with the same strength that brought me through this storm. Life after the divorce settles into a new rhythm, a dance of healing and rediscovery. The house, now infused with a sense of liberation, becomes a haven for my mother and me. But just when I start to believe that the storm has passed, the winds of the past swirl back into my life. It happens on a quiet Tuesday evening. My phone rings, and Gregory's name flashes on the screen, a ghost from a chapter I had closed. I answer, curiosity piqued and defenses up. "Lydia, I need to talk to you." Gregory's voice comes through, hesitant and strained. "Why, Gregory? What's left to say?" I ask, my tone guarded. "It's about everything. I've made mistakes, Lydia, big ones. I realize that now," he says, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. His words, meant to convey remorse, only stir a well of bitterness within me. "Mistakes? You call uprooting our lives and siding with Alara against your own wife and her mother just mistakes?" Gregory pauses, and when he speaks again, his voice is laced with something akin to regret. "I was wrong, Lydia, about Alara, about how I treated you and your mother. I see that now." The confession, though unexpected, doesn't soften the sharp edges of my memories. Realizations don't erase actions, Gregory. You chose your path. There's a shuffling sound, and I picture Gregory pacing, a habit of his when cornered. I know, but Lydia, I miss you. I miss us." The admission hangs in the air, a plea wrapped in nostalgia. But the man I loved, the man I thought I knew, vanished long ago, replaced by a stranger. "Miss us? Gregory, there is no us anymore. You made sure of that." My voice steady. Gregory's voice breaks slightly. "Can we meet? Just once to talk. Please, Lydia." The request, a blend of hope and despair, makes me pause. Part of me yearns for closure, for a final goodbye to the man I once shared my life with. But another part, the part hardened by betrayal, knows better. "No, Gregory, there's nothing left to discuss. We've said all there is to say," I say, the finality in my voice sealing the conversation. As I end the call, a sense of empowerment washes over me. The Gregory, who stood on my doorstep all those months ago, demanding changes I couldn't accept, is no more. In his place stands a man broken by his choices, seeking solace in a past that no longer exists. That night, as I sit with my mother, sharing stories and laughter, I realize the full extent of my journey. From a woman caught in the tides of others' decisions to one who commands her own destiny. The road ahead is mine to travel, with its twists and turns, its shadows and lights. But one thing is clear. I am no longer the woman who once sought validation in the eyes of a man who could not see her worth. I am Lydia, whole and unbroken, master of my story. In the weeks that follow my last conversation with Gregory, life takes on a peaceful rhythm. My mother and I find joy in the small things, gardening, cooking, and long walks in the neighborhood. The house, once a battleground, is now a sanctuary of tranquility. But just as I begin to bask in the calm, an unexpected encounter jolts me back to reality. It's a sunny Saturday morning, and I'm at the local market when I spot Alara. She's at a fruit stand, her once haughty demeanor replaced by a look of wariness. Our eyes meet, and for a moment time stands still. I approach her, curiosity getting the better of me. "Alara, it's been a while." She turns, her face a mask of surprise and discomfort. "Lydia, yeah, it has." Her voice lacks its usual edge, her posture deflated. The sight of her so diminished stirs a complex mix of emotions within me. "I heard about the debts, the troubles you and Gregory are facing," I say, keeping my tone neutral. Alara lets out a sigh, the fight seemingly drained from her. "Yeah, things didn't quite go as planned. Gregory's struggling, and I guess I didn't help matters." Her admission, a rare glimpse of vulnerability, takes me aback. "I suppose we all have our lessons to learn," I reply. Alara nods, a flicker of something like remorse crossing her face. "I just wanted to say, Lydia, I'm sorry. For everything." The apology, unexpected and raw, leaves me momentarily speechless. This was the woman who had once seemed incapable of regret, now standing before me, seeking forgiveness. "Apology noted, Alara. But it doesn't change what happened," I say, my words firm but not unkind. "I know," she replies, her gaze dropping. I needed you to know." We part ways, the encounter leaving a trail of mixed feelings in its wake. As I walk back home, I reflect on the journey I've embarked on, the pain, the betrayal, and the triumphs. In the solitude of the evening, I sit with my mother on our porch, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. We talk about the future, about the possibilities that lie ahead. "Mom, do you think I did the right thing?" I ask, seeking affirmation. She takes my hand, her eyes warm and understanding. "Lydia, you stood up for yourself and for me. You showed strength and grace in the face of adversity. Yes, you did the right thing." Her words settle in my heart, a comforting affirmation of my choices. As the night falls, I realize that this chapter of my life, though fraught with challenges, has been a crucible of transformation. I am no longer defined by the shadows of my past. I am a woman reborn, resilient, and free. My story, once entangled in the whims of others, is now mine to write. And as I look to the stars, I make a silent vow to live a life of authenticity, to cherish the love of my mother, and to embrace the endless possibilities that await. I am Lydia Graham, and my journey is just beginning.